I put them in nice Mylar bags with, like the older stuff. They're in like nice Mylar with the acid-free backing boards that you buy, and they're perfectly fine, you know. And for like regular stuff, they're in poly bags. And like the Mylar people, they would have you believe that putting your comic in a regular poly bag is like unto wrapping it in a tissue and setting it out in the rain. And I can tell you that this is not the case. I have pulled books out of my collection that are in regular poly bags with regular backing boards that were 40 years old and hadn't been taken out of a long box in 40 years. And they're in the same shape that they were in when they went into those bags and boards 40 years ago. These are not like all deteriorated. They're not wrecked up. They're not like, and it's just like, it has to do with storage too. Cause I live in California. I don't have like, it's not high humidity. I don't have
Right.
I don't have an incredibly hostile environment that I'm storing these things in. I store them fairly decently, you know. And like I said, poly bags, 40 years old. I mean, from like literally the 80s, right? They're fine, you know.
Well,
Some
that's
of them
good.
were
That's
like
good.
the
That's good
poly
to
was
know.
like a little weighty on it. Like a few of them, not all of them, but some of them, the poly was a little weighty. So when I put them, I rebagged those. But I mean, it's just like other people are like, oh, poly bags are only good for temporary storage and you got to replace them every 10 years. And I'm like, no, you don't.
You've got
People
the
who
proof,
sell
right?
the bags and boards want you to maybe believe that. And it's like, hey, Mylar's really nice. I have a lot of Mylar, but Mylar is also really expensive. And like most of my books are dollar bin books, you know. It's like, what do I want to put a dollar book into a Mylar that costs $1? You know, it's just
Yeah.
like that
Yeah. No,
makes
it
no
doesn't make
sense.
sense.
So, you know, bags and boards, yes, absolutely use bags and boards. I mean, it's just like there's all kinds of reasons to use bags and boards, and they do protect books. I mean, like I've got some old books that weren't in bags and boards, and they do look degraded, right? But then I've got old books that are in just the regular poly bags, and they're fine. You know, so take from that what you will. It's always better to use better. You know, I won't tell someone don't use Mylar. You know, Mylar is great, but I will also say you probably don't need to use, you know, 4 millimeter Mylar and, you know, like make things like completely like, you know, kill a zombie with the thing. It's just like overkill. I have like the 2 mil Mylights, and those
Okay.
work fine. The Mylights and halfbacks, they're great. Like
Well,
cheaper.
it's good to know, right? Because I know, yeah, I've heard that a number of, oh, you got to swap out your bags and boards every, periodically, 7 to 10 years or whatever it may be. Yeah. So,
Another advantage, I don't know if you looked at, like, there's some Mylars that are open on the top. They don't have a flap that folds over. I don't know why someone would use those. It's just like, if I'm not going to have a flap closing the thing in, um, somebody
yeah, I think
spills
you
a
would,
soda
right? You
on
would
the
want
box
that.
and it like goes right into the, it's like, I mean, what is the point of that? A bug can crawl right in. I mean, a bug is not going to chew through 2 millimeter Mylar. You know, maybe a really determined bug will, but I mean, if you've got like the flap on a 2 millimeter Mylar, to me, that's way better than a 4 millimeter Mylar that's like open. And, or what else are you going to do? Are you like putting a 2 millimeter Mylar into a 4 millimeter Mylar or something? I mean, it's like, what in the world are you doing with these things? I don't understand why someone would use an open-ended Mylar. That's just
Right.
me.
No, yeah, that wouldn't make sense. Looking at old man's comment here.
Yeah. Oriented polypropylene. They're probably thicker poly, but they're not Mylar, because Mylar is not polypropylene. Mylar's got a different name for it. The difference is that poly will actually degrade when subjected to certain extremes of temperature or other kinds of things, and the Mylar won't. Theoretically, it's like archival and is much more stable than the polypropylene. So I don't know.
But I think, as you
Um,
mentioned, right, certain
but as
climate
you, yeah,
control
if
is
you're
important.
doing good with your stuff, like don't put them in an attic, right? It's like attic, really bad place. Attics get really hot, you know. It's just the way they are. I have mine in my garage, but my garage is literally under my feet. I'm in my bonus room that sits over my garage. So my garage, like a lot of people, they have a garage where it's just like a roof and then it's the outside. So like on a hot
Right,
day,
right,
the sun's beating directly onto this, and it's usually garages are not insulated. They don't have insulated walls. You know, they don't have an insulated roof, and they get really, really hot. My garage is finished. It has insulation in the walls. It's got an insulated double wall door. No windows in it. So no light gets in.
right. Yeah, yeah.
And there's like this entire room sitting above it that provides a buffer. So it really doesn't get hot in my garage. So it's like perfectly fine for storage.
No, that's good. Yeah, no, I know. Obviously, that's important, right? The climate, humidity here on the East Coast, you got to be careful with, with
Yes.
folks and people storing in basements where it's very, can be very damp, or you can
I
have water
worry about,
damage. So yeah,
I would be really worried, if I had a basement, because basements can flood, right? Um, and the heat, as old man points out,
oh yeah,
that
attic. Yeah.
that's like the acid in the papers. I mean, that's when you get like the really bad browning and they get brittle and stuff. That's heat damage, and like moisture, like can get them to be wavy. They can get mold. You
Oh
know,
sure.
that's another thing. If you're in a moist environment and they're not kind of sealed down tight, you can get mold damage. You can get rust. The staples will rust.
Oh, right.
There's like all kinds of things that can happen,
Yeah.
which I don't have a problem with here because it doesn't really get particularly humid here. Not like, I mean, it's not like Colorado, where it's like really low humidity to the point you know, like your nasal tract. I've always had problems when I'm in Colorado where it's just like it's too dry. So that's like the ideal sort of situation at Colorado. But here it's not humid to the point where it's like damaging. So
Right.